This week, there's a bright future ahead for EdTech.
But it's a bumpy road on future-forward EdTech innovations.
Can education be the bridge to a better tech future?
I'm Alexis Scordato.
And I am Stephen Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Hey, Alexa.
Hey, Steve.
So,
how's it going?
you know, this is one of those shows where, like, you're the expert and I am merely your humble
I'm not so much
observer
an expert.
and interviewer. EdTech is a world that you've lived in.
I have lived in it, so I guess full disclosure, I did spend years, almost 4 years working at 2U, which we're going to talk about in this episode. And I've also done work with a company Thinkful, which is in like the boot camp and online coding education space, which was recently acquired by Chegg, which is probably one of the largest education companies. So, yeah.
So we will get unique insider insights into the space. But before we do that, just a huge thank you to our friends at IEEE Spectrum. They provided a terrific article that's part of this week's show, and they're also just great editorial friends, and we love having on the show. So, all right, so let's just dive right in. We've got kind of broadly 3 chapters. Trends in EdTech, big corporate players in EdTech, and then lessons learned. And if we have time at the end, there's kind of a kicker piece about university innovation. But we've got a lot to cover. So let's just start with kind of the big headlines. There was a survey that kind of was a bit of a canary in a coal mine for us, right? We found it on Education Dive, and it was a survey that essentially said U.S. students have low to medium tech skills.
Yeah, and it was this I guess scoring rubric is out of 700 points, and we ranked below, the likes of Denmark and Korea and Portugal, Luxembourg.
So the thing is, you read the article, and that I found myself puzzled by is, there's this easy kind of like kids are digital natives, so they are inherently technically capable, so it's all good, kind of like check the box. If they use Instagram and Snap, they must be technically capable. But what the survey found was that even the kids that were kind of social media actively maven-ish didn't score particularly well on kind of the underlying knowledge of technology.
So, I mean, the United States has always not performed at the top in STEM. So that's not new as a whole. It was interesting that the study actually showed that types of computer literacy or computational thinking had some gender patterns, like I guess women or females were better at using technology to find information and connect it to communication, and that the male students were better at actually creating almost like programs, like tasks, which it also is like not very surprising either, like transactional versus relational, or sort of like a if this then that logic versus, I guess, more of the softer side of computing, sort of that this resulted in that.
So part of what we're going to talk about on the pod today is what we can do about this, and there's a bunch of different ways we're going to look at kind of ed tech, but maybe even before we get past that, I would ask you the question, having seen a bunch of companies take different swings at it, like, were there things that you looked at and just knew instinctively, were like, yeah, that might look good on paper, but I don't see that playing out in the market? Like, were there things that you now look back in time and go, that was a preventable, problem?
Like as a whole, I think EdTech is you can almost do 2 separate shows. There's EdTech K through 12, and then there's EdTech Higher Ed. And they're actually two really different
Yeah.
arenas to kind of play in. But I'd say that as a whole, the industry, the education industry, is obviously like ripe for disruption. There are so many applications of technology that can enhance and lead to better student outcomes. But affecting change in both areas is really hard. I mean, it the bureaucracy in higher education is very real. And then I'd say that all of the local considerations at sort of the federal, state, and district level in K through 12 present challenges of their own.
So I remember I was at a conference, I won't tell you which one, and it was 2014, and I was like in between sessions and standing out, getting a cup of coffee. And there was a woman on the phone speaking very excitedly to a colleague, and I guess I eavesdropped, but she was in public and she wasn't being very quiet. But they hadn't pulled the trigger yet, but they had determined they were going to spend $2+ billion and buy Minecraft. And
Oh, wow, what a conversation to overhear.
yeah, and she was from Microsoft, and she was being quite granular about the fact that they thought it was their entry point into K to 12 education.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking at the time, really? I mean, I knew Minecraft a little bit, but I guess I didn't think of it. And of course, give Microsoft credit, they've actually done an extraordinarily good job of both managing the acquisition and building education, an education platform around it.
Hmm. Absolutely. I mean, the market is huge. It's actually just the business mechanics of it are tricky to navigate. I mean, even if you think about, say, Google and what they've done with education. I mean, they started with college students and emails, and there's a strategic benefit to that. You get college students with Gmail using G Suite as 18, 19-year-olds, like they're going to want to use that at work when they graduate.
Yeah, I mean, what I liked about the Minecraft story, different than just customer acquisition, was I thought gamification of certain kinds of education struck me as a way to get kids engaged. And there's some, we'll talk about some startups that may be doing that as well. But the next kind of piece on the horizon was this question about whether or not ed tech could democratize education in Asia Pacific. And I was surprised that this is a article in Entrepreneur magazine. I was surprised at the conclusions that they reached.
Yeah, I mean, the article itself kind of surprised me because, one, I don't usually read a lot about ed tech in APAC, I guess.
Sure.
And I also have family in the Philippines. And again, this is like my personal history and bias coming into play. Like the markets themselves and this, like, if you even were to eliminate technology, there's so much that could be done with the system itself. Like everything from the funding, the incentives, the training, the cultural implications. Like, one of my big, I guess, headlines in this whole conversation is really this idea that, yes, while technology has a place, I very much lean on the side of only to a certain extent.
Well, doesn't technology in education almost inevitably, isn't the byproduct of that privatization?
Yeah, but there's this massive tension that we're experiencing right now, which is, can the private sector does the private sector have to be the be all end all to solving public public programs and systems?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes,
I mean, that's like a whole other thing, but like, again, it's you wish public schools could innovate and deliver on their own without having to lean on the private sector, but that the private sector is where all of the innovation is happening, and it sort of is where I think a lot of the interesting technology is taking place. So, in this article, we talk about this platform Tenepe, which is a live online teaching platform. And that's incredible, right? Because it's like anything that can sort of augment the classroom experience and create more engagement or deeper, meaningful engagement and sort of like data points that can inform how a student is tracking, um, that's like a net positive, like that's great. I'm not sure how innovative it is, but like the fact that it is a platform being adopted in a large market like Asia, that is interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe I'm off the topic a little bit, but what I worry about is you take a teacher, you put them in front of a computer. They've got 30 students or 50 students or 100 students who are now all working on their computers. The computer flags and says, this student is having a problem. And much like when you call the phone company and say, I'm having a problem with my phone, there becomes a branch and tree kind of solution, which is if they don't do well, if they do poorly on this test, give them this unit to, like, and again, this,
Hmm.
I remember thinking about this teachers in my life that were memorable and important for me. Um, Noticed things I was passionate about or things that I was having trouble with because they walked over and kind of got my body language and talked to me. And that I'm not sure it was an analysis as much as it was but an observation. But I worry that that's something that's going to be very hard to do remotely.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely a few things in here, which is, okay, what are the benefits of tech-enabled learning? One is scalability. One teacher, as great as a teacher is, can only, I think, track in real time so many students. Two, the data itself is interesting. Not that it's the be all end all to a solution, but it's one of many inputs that might inform either how a student is doing or how a curriculum can evolve. Um, and I'd say like the third is, if the platform can actually inspire, motivate, or engage students in a way that, say, a textbook cannot, then that also feels like a really clear benefit.
Yeah, no, that I agree with. All right, so let's go to talk about some companies, and then we'll jump to the big companies, and then we'll swing over to the lessons learned. But let's so there was an article that from Forbes that listed a bunch of ed tech entrepreneurs that they say were disrupting the way we learn, and they came up with a bunch of companies that I hadn't heard of. Now again, you're more in the space, so maybe you'll say no, I know these, but they all were like, and I do a lot of reading in this. I Sparks Math I'd never heard of them.
I've only heard of them, I think maybe just through like a just in like lists like this, like industry lists. But again, I also did not have these are like not top of mind companies for me, but
Yeah.
some of that is the LMS space actually goes back to like Blackboard.
Yep.
There are very few companies who have had like a ton of funding or major exits. Like I said, the learning space is something that people are really passionate about, but the mechanics of the business and the entrepreneur track in it is fraught with lots of complications. So, yeah, anyway.
But my memory as the father of two young men who went through the middle and high school and college system was that Blackboard was universally hated.
Hmm.
I mean, just buggy and difficult and kludgy and hacky and bad. I mean, I have never used it, so I don't know that for a fact. But so what I liked about the Sparks Maths, it's a little hard to say.
It's a
Um, yeah,
mouthful.
um, was that they use a lot of data points and a lot of handwritten questions to kind of it wasn't kind of a one size fits all, put you in front of a set of problems and then you solve for it. It seemed to me a pretty good use of, I mean, I guess it's AI in its
Hmm.
core. Um,
Yep. So it's like adaptive learning is like something that you'll hear, which is like, can the data help evolve, I guess, the student's progress and what they see next or what they learn next?
Were you good at math?
I was pretty good at math.
Yeah, see, I was terrible at math. I'm sitting here wondering if an adaptive learning robo teacher would have made me any better at it, or I have a feeling no. But
Well, some of it is, I think, like, what's a good analogy to use? I mean, it's that if you believe that the way humans learn is different. Some people are social learners, where if you put them in a group, they'll actually excel. There are other learners who are visual learners, and so lots of diagrams will help them grasp concepts faster. And so part of the opportunity with all of these startups or technologies is that to the extent that we can actually customize learning experiences for students, the better it is for everyone.
yeah, I think I agree with that. I guess I just worry about the testing and scoring part. Like, I mean,
Oh,
the
yeah.
teaching to the test. That whole.
But that's like that's an age-old problem. That's not even really specific to technology. And anytime you're doing an assessment, um, how do you assess holistically? I mean, there are coding exercises now in the workplace where you're not even getting an interview without passing, a coding test. So
Yeah,
we see it happen at schools, like with SATs, and we see that translate in professional contexts.
that is true. I think that's a conversation for another day about recruiting and HR and all that stuff. Which we definitely should talk about because it'd be fascinating. All right, so I'm going to skip the rest of these startups because as I'm glancing at them, they all seem not that interesting given the stuff that we have ahead that we can talk about. So let's jump ahead to the IEEE Spectrum story about using STEM electronic mentoring. I like this story. I liked a lot.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, and when I say, like, anytime mentorship is introduced, like, I am always like a fan of that, because I think learning sometimes can be sort of one of the most isolating experiences. So the general premise of uh, taking industry professionals and sort of like pairing them or connecting them to third, fourth, and fifth graders, is really cool.
Have you ever done online mentoring?
So early in my career, I used to do reverse mentoring.
I I remember.
Yeah, so I was trying to teach older professionals about the internet, and sometimes I would do that. You know, Not necessarily like on video. It could have been phone. We have a mutual friend who I won't say out loud, but you do
Yes.
calls, Google Hangouts. Yeah.
Yes. You have famous reverse mentors in your past.
Yeah.
Uh, all right. What I liked about this, I went through and clicked through to the actual website that comes from the article, um, and it's basically tryengineeringtogether.com,
Hmm.
which came out of Cricket Media and was produced in conjunction with IEEE. And I'm not an engineer, so I couldn't be in this program as an engineer mentor, but I would love to do this for students. I love this idea of, you know, capable, experienced adults being able to remote mentor students in all kinds of, filmmaking, English, history, geography. Like, seems like really good. Although I guess the danger there is if you don't create a structure around it like these guys did, you end up with, you know, people passing along bad educational habits.
Totally. Have you ever tried coding, by the way?
Sort of ish. I mean, at one point I convinced myself I needed to learn something, and I signed up for a Code Academy online course and got a couple of hours into it and decided I wasn't going to do it. But
So it's interesting because there's so many ways to be a self-taught developer. Um, but like I said, the experience of learning can be isolating. And so one of the fastest ways that I got over initial coding hurdles was to pair program, which is fairly common even with experienced coders. The idea of base is almost like if you're in a Google Doc and say you and I were writing show notes together, like that's the equivalent of doing that with pair programming. And so to see this in like a K through 12, like an elementary school context is awesome because you can actually go to the site codementor.io, and this is actually like developers helping one another program.
So how would you pair program if one of the two people involved was inexperienced?
Oh, did I lose you, Steve?
Yeah, for a second, just then you came
Oh, I
back.
said the question was how
How could I pair program? So just to be clear, I'm not a developer, but I do build and run a fair number of websites. So,
yeah.
self-taught for sure,
Hmm.
and, down to the fact that I will write CSS and HTML and, do that stuff. But it's generally some combination of I have a problem I need to solve. I Google it. I look at a video. I figure out how to do it, and then I test it. And then if it doesn't break something, I install it.
Hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, think about the experience of producing this podcast. Like, if we were to share a screen and I was to look at the audio video setup and you were trying to figure something out, I might say, okay, what if you tried, uh, changing this menu item and then you go change it? It's basically just collaborative problem solving.
Hmm. Okay. I have to think about how to put that to use. But anyway, but back to try engineering together. Definitely like this idea. Would like to support it. We should definitely, go to the show notes and find the URL and click on it. And if you're a developer, sign up. And I don't know how many hours they require, but it certainly seems like a good thing for a
Hmm.
skilled developer to do. All right, so let's jump ahead a little bit because I definitely want to make sure we have time to talk about, you know, the 2U story. Um, Maybe start by just giving everybody a little bit of background as to, you know, what you worked there for a period of time and how you got there and kind of when it was.
Yeah, so I mean, I was probably one of the first 100 employees, and then was there probably like a little right before the IPO. So I really got to see the company evolve. I mean, it is sort of one of the um, sort of biggest success stories in education in the sense that prior to 2U, Blackboard was really um, the only previous exit that had sort of been seen in the space. So, facts to you was founded by John Katzman, who founded the Princeton Review, uh, is currently led by Chip Pausick, who used to run Hooked on Phonics, and then was also co-founded by Jeremy Johnson, who now is the CEO of Andela. So you had a lot of education veterans sort of at the helm, and the company raised $100 million before going public. And its mission was to really help universities transform by taking their graduate degree programs online. And so I think that sort of leads up then to this article in Forbes, which really talks about sort of recent events over the summer. To use market cap, basically, I think it was almost like 60 or 70% of its market cap was depleted. And I'm not sure what aspect of the story you want to tackle first, Steve, but that's the summary, right? That's really.
Yeah, so when you read that headline, I mean, the first thing you find when companies fall off a cliff is that usually there's something bad that happened. And what I found interesting about the article was essentially what as I understood it, you know, the education business changed, and 2U, again, this may, as I read it, 2U did the right thing and said, hey, we're going to focus on categories where we actually think we can provide value and not have our margins, chopped up. But
Mhm.
but the failure of the price wasn't through somebody with their hand in the cookie jar or something bad. It was,
No.
bigger educational institutions figuring out that they wanted to control their own product.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a shareholder, and I obviously when the stock took a tumble, it was not great. But a market correction for me personally always felt inevitable because part of the way 2U did its roadshow and the IPO, and part of how it sort of continued to win over shareholders was really talking about school as a service, meaning there was this core technology component and these bundled services. And so it very much modeled the SaaS multiples that we see in the tech sector. And, again, the companies are so far from being anything like one another. But if you think about what happened with WeWork, or if you look at companies like Casper and Peloton, like basically any unicorn companies, to what extent are they tech companies? And so I think 2U was ahead of its time in terms of being part of that conversation. Is 2U a tech company or a service-based company? I think obviously there's an aspect of both, but the market correction for me is not so much that it is a failure. It's actually that the disruption that we are going to see in higher education is not necessarily as big of an opportunity maybe in the graduate degree category as maybe the skills and course category. So they actually acquired a company called Trilogy Education earlier this year. And that was also part of, I think, what investors frowned upon, which was this idea. So they bought Get Smarter, which is a South African company, and they specialize in courses. So you can take a business course or an engineering course from MIT or Harvard. And then they bought Trilogy, which actually does coding boot camps with schools like Rutgers and UCLA. And so the crash, again, it's just diversifying where the revenue's coming from. For years, the meat and potatoes of 2U revenue was coming from the belief that they would continue to scale graduate programs across their university partners. And then they basically signaled in an investor call that, they actually see the opportunity diminished in the grad program side, and that they see the future of the company being in more of a consumer oriented way. And they announced a recent CMO hire, and she comes from SeatGeek. She was a former head of marketing at SeatGeek. So when you think about the mechanics of the sale, again, it's like the writing's on the wall.
So I guess the thing that when I remember 2U from a long time ago, it seemed to me that at least the pitch that I remember hearing was universities are inherently not technology capable. We're going to provide a plug and play opportunity for them to take their intellectual capital, which is courses, and we're going to turn it into a very high quality but platform based offering. So for the universities to say, actually, we're going to use our own third-party software, we're going to do it ourselves, strikes me as like maybe an understandable but disappointing outcome.
What? 2U was just the first in the space, and then I think ever since 2U, there's an entire market of what they call OPMs, online program managers. And so, like any market, there's more competition now. 2U just had first mover advantage, and that's just starting to catch up.
Well, it's fascinating. And, we've almost left the philosophical part for last, which is, the idea that the internet, which is now, a handful of years old, but relatively, still in its youth, that the reason we got excited about it back in the day is because it was going to dramatically change knowledge and information and how it moves around the world, democratize knowledge and information. And to me, EdTech is the tip of that spear. I mean, the fact that people all over the planet are connected to this network now and want to learn, they want to get smarter, they want to become educated, They want to get higher degrees. They want to advance themselves. That's, to me, that's what the internet was built to do.
Absolutely, but education is sort of, um, there's so many dynamics in there when we think about content and media and the internet. And now you think about libraries, textbooks, and what people need to learn or what knowledge is important. When we think about social networks and how individuals should connect with one another. And then we think about classrooms and campuses and the quad and spaces where people who are developing and forming meaningful relationships at critical points in their life, stages of life, adolescence and early adulthood. It really is so interesting because you can break apart any single one of these parallels, and there's an opportunity for us almost as anthropologists to say, based off of all the things we know, how do we actually evolve an experience that is optimal? And I think that's why education is the most complicated, but to your point, it actually has sort of the most potential to really do a world of good.
Indeed. And with that, we are out of time. You get the last word because that's awesome. Have an excellent week. Enjoy the fabulous television that we're all going to be exposed to this week.
Oh, can't wait.
And see you next week.
See you next week, Steve.
Bye.